So I think the important thing is to look at what is the economic definition of productive, who's excluded by that, and what kinds of things are included. And Marilyn Waring has done a lot of work on that with her book, Counting for Nothing. And I think all we need to do is ask ourselves, has there been a declaration that the human species must come to an end? I haven't heard about it. I have 3 kids. Nobody told me. That would be the only way it would make sense for the economic system to financially penalize mothers for the work of producing both the producers and the consumers. Now, nobody's made that declaration. So the second question is, where do customers come from? Any answers?
Mothers.
Mothers, yes. So the whole dependency rhetoric is in fact reversed. Everybody with a job, the entire economic system, every industry is dependent on the unpaid work of mothers. And at SWAG, the Status of Women Action Group, that's the group that I'm with, and along with Livable Income for Everyone, that's another group, we call this women's slavery. So we want to end women's slavery. We also want to end the exploitation of the earth, of Mother Earth, for things that are entirely unnecessary and destructive. And if you think about the number of industries and the number of consumptive items that are either harmful or largely unnecessary, we are squandering all these precious resources in order to create jobs for people. Because somewhere along the line, some people, I think it might have been some white males in Europe, decided that jobs were the only way to distribute resources. Through jobs. That's how we're going to distribute things. So if you don't have a job, you don't get anything, and you have to be punished. And so, of course, the people who are being punished are the most vulnerable people in the world, including people with disabilities, mothers, children, the elders. In fact, you could say it's the majority of people in the world. So when we talk about guaranteed livable income, I think we need to say why we want it is really important. There's a writer called Carol Pateman who has written about guaranteed income from the perspective of we need it for democracy. And certainly that's the case, because I know when I worked in different jobs, depending on the situation, I had to keep my mouth shut, I'll tell you, because if you say the wrong thing, you can be fired. You certainly don't talk about anything political. So we need to have productive choice, and we need to redefine what work is. And there's some writers who've written a book called The Subsistence Perspective, and they redefine what productive work is, and that it is something that creates, maintains, and enhances life. So under that definition, the things that make the GDP grow right now, things like war, car accidents, fast food, junk food, alcohol, gambling, all these things that cause different kinds of harm in our society, those things shouldn't be counted as productive, and yet they are. And yet unpaid work and the work that mothers do and the work that nature does, the work that children do, the work that elders do, none of that is counted as productive in the well-being of a country. And they're all chasing this economic growth. Let's grow the GDP, and we've got to be more productive. I don't know if any of you have looked at, I read the Globe and Mail every day, and how many times there's articles that say, Canada needs to be more productive, we're getting behind. And yet you can find other articles that say being more productive means that there's fewer people needed for doing work. So we're at a point now where we have a techno-moral conflict, because there's more and more technology that's reducing the need for human labor, and yet we have this 500-year-old John Calvinistic idea that we have to have the work ethic and everyone must keep busy. And I even find that idea in so-called progressive organizations that keep saying, oh, we need to have full employment, we need to make more jobs, government must make more family-supporting jobs, which is something Ken Giorgetti said in a press release just October 5th, not that long ago. And I'm looking at this and going, family-supporting jobs? Well, that would imply that there would have to be some families, some children being produced, as in some future producers and consumers being produced, looked after, raised. But of course, that work is never mentioned by the labor union, which I find highly ironic considering that when you're pregnant and you're giving birth, you're in labor. but the labor movement doesn't want to have anything to do with that kind of labor. So the whole economic, I guess, rules that most of the people in the world did not make up, but they're ruling our lives and they're destroying the planet, there's a fatal flaw in them. I mean, other than we might destroy the planet, there's that flaw too. But the flaw is something that's in Adam Smith's The Wealth of Nations, which is really funny because he's the father of capitalism. He said, the purpose of all production is consumption. So, which makes sense. If you've ever worked in a store and no customers come in, your boss soon tells you, well, we're going to have to cut your hours back this week. So this is like universal. You can't have a donut factory and you make thousands and thousands of donuts, and if nobody's eating the donuts, you soon have waste and you go broke because you've overproduced. And so around the world right now, that's one of the things that was going to be in my presentation. I have all these clippings of the overproduction problem. There's like 3.5 million unsold vehicles. There's overproduction of electronic gadgets, of many kinds of agricultural surpluses. It's the thing they don't want to talk about. There's an amazing article written by somebody from India. It's on the Life website. It's called Produce and Perish. So they were telling the farmers in India, you have to produce, produce, produce. So they started producing. They ended up in a rage dumping their potatoes and dumping their tomatoes because they had produced so much that the price had dropped. And so they were producing and perishing. And the suicide rate for farmers is apparently quite high all over the world. And so we have this problem in that we have an overproduction problem, which is exacerbated by the fact that as people get poorer, they can't even buy the stuff that they would normally want to buy. And there's a book called The Globalization of Poverty by Michael Chossudovsky, and he's one of the few people that's writing about this overproduction problem. And so the solutions that are put forward by both the left and the right are so focused on production. They're so focused on glorification of the work ethic, excluding the work, of caring for, children or elders or family members, or caring for the planet, excluding all that work. But it's so focused on this productivist idea. It's almost like a religion. And I think another really important factor, for a rationale for a guaranteed livable income is also for health. If you think of the number of jobs that rely on the consumption of ill health producing products, it's staggering. If you consider all the sugared foods, the fast foods, if you consider alcohol and tobacco, all those things that cause harm, millions of jobs depend on them. So there was an economist from UBC that I heard talking just a few weeks ago at it was a thing about aging and honoring our elders, volunteers. And I asked him, because he's an economist, but he was also studying health. And so I said, what would happen if everybody stopped drinking alcohol, smoking cigarettes, eating junk food, eating sugared food? They're all out riding their bicycles, they're all getting really fit and healthy. Would the economy collapse? And he said, well, if it all happened in a year, yes. So he said, but if you phased it out over 10 years, you could move people into other areas. So I asked him, well, what other areas would those be? And he's like, well, that's a good question. That's what we need to ask people. If they're saying they're against a guaranteed livable income, we need to ask them, okay, what are you saying more of that needs to be produced? Because if you're saying people need more jobs, you're saying we need to have forced production, forced consumption, regardless of whether it's necessary or beneficial. So what things are you saying we need to produce more and consume more of, and yet make them name them? I mean, one of my friends was going around putting up posters in Victoria that said, your hard work is killing the planet. Like, we really need less work, especially if it's destructive or harmful or unnecessary.